If you've ever been to a pet store, you might have seen tiny hermit crabs. They're cute, shy, and live in adorable enclosures. But not every hermit crab is that cute. In faraway, remote islands lives a hermit crab so large that even Charles Darwin called it monstrous. This is the coconut crab. Hi, I'm Danielle Dubeau, and you're watching Animalogic. Coconut crabs, or robber crabs, get a bad reputation because they're humongous, they have gigantic claws, and they've been seen eating birds and kittens. But if you get past all that, they're actually amazing creatures. Coconut crabs are massive. They can have a leg span of over 1 meter and weigh over 4 kilograms. They're the largest land invertebrate on Earth, and they might have actually reached the current physiological size limit for arthropods. Back in the day, there used to be larger land arthropods, such as the fearsome Arthropleura, which grew to be 2.5 meters long. But as oxygen levels in the air dropped, their large bodies became unsustainable, as they're not as good at absorbing oxygen as vertebrates. Coconut crabs are the biggest land arthropods that we have, but if you want to see them, you might have to travel far. They're found on islands in the South Pacific and the Indian Ocean, with large populations living on Christmas Island and the Cook Islands. Their distribution aligns nicely with the distribution of the coconut palm, even though coconuts aren't their only food source. They are surprisingly great climbers and often climb the palm trees to grab the coconuts. When possible, they prefer to eat fleshy fruit and nuts. Some of those fruits, including the sea mango, have toxins that get sequestered in the crabs' bodies and make the crabs poisonous to humans. Their asymmetrical claws are among the largest in the animal kingdom, and for some reason, their left is always larger than the right. South claws represent. Coconut crabs have the strongest claw grip in the animal kingdom at 1,500 newtons. They're helpful for self-defense, hunting, and for opening coconuts. To do this, they pull away the outer fibers in a process that might take days. Then, they pierce holes through the eyes of the coconut with their thin and pointy legs. This makes the coconut easier to break to access the meat. Coconuts are so important to them that in areas without coconuts, they're about half the size of coconut crabs from areas that have coconuts. Though mostly vegetarian, coconut crabs will eat anything they can get their claws on. Carrion, rats, birds, and other live animals are consumed when they're available. For mid-sized coconut crabs, their only predators are humans and larger coconut crabs. In one particularly gruesome case, a coconut crab was observed eating a red-footed booby. The crab was observed climbing a tree in the middle of the night. It approached a sleeping red-footed booby and grabbed it by the wing, breaking its bone. This caused the bird to fall to the ground. The crab followed it and grabbed the other wing, also breaking it. The smell of blood attracted 20 other coconut crabs, which proceeded to have booby for dinner. There's a morbid theory that the reason why Amelia Earhart was never found was because coconut crabs may have dragged her into their burrows and eaten her. Their sense of smell on land is very advanced compared to other crustaceans, and they have convergently evolved an olfactory system similar to insects, with antennae full of chemoreceptors. Their antennae help them find food, but also help them find potential Valentine's Day dates, which for them is between May and September. Males deposit a spermatophore on the abdomen of the female. She uses this to fertilize her egg cases, which she carries externally. When they're ready to hatch, she goes to the water and releases them when the tide is high. The babies live as plankton for about a month, fully dependent on ocean currents for movement. When they're a little older, they go to the bottom and use abandoned sea snail shells for protection. Then, within the first year of their life, they go to land and lose the ability to breathe underwater. If you find a coconut crab, do not throw it into the water. Just give it a good claw shake and send it on its way. I'm kidding, do not touch their claws. They will continue growing for decades. We're still not sure when they reach their maximum size, but it's believed to be at least 40 years of age, with some scientists claiming that they could grow until they're about 120 years old. Like all crustaceans, coconut crabs molt as they grow. They need to shed their old exoskeleton and grow a new larger one. The new exoskeleton is initially very soft, which makes them very vulnerable for a few weeks after molting. These pinchy boys molt every year. To avoid harm, they dig a burrow to shed their old exoskeleton, then they eat it to recoup nutrients and wait for the new one to harden. I guess they really hate birthdays. Unfortunately, it's getting increasingly hard to find huge coconut crabs. They got this big because they had no natural predators on their islands. But humans and the animals they bring, such as dogs and pigs, have caused a rapid decline in their populations. They're now extinct in part of their historical range, such as Madagascar and mainland Australia. Hopefully, as we learn more about them, we'll be able to protect them better. But until then, I guess we'll have to keep letting them eat kittens and birds as their populations recover. Deep in Victoria's Otway Ranges swims a cute little riddle, wrapped in a mystery, inside an enigma. It's venomous. It has the sixth sense, and it looks like it's borrowed all of its body parts from different animals. I think I see one. I think I see one straight ahead of me. This is the freshwater chimera, the species that confused a generation, the result of Dr. Frankenstein's cute streak, the platypus. We had to wake up around 5:30 to get out of here for 6:30 and make it down to a boat. The whole point here is to try and find some platypuses, and for me that's like the animal that I want to see more than anything out here. So 5:30 or not, like, I'm super excited. I'm tired. I don't have caffeine. But hopefully we'll have platypuses. We just got to Lake Elizabeth and the sun is starting to rise. Oh! Can you hear that? Those are kookaburras. This hike is waking me up better than any coffee has. Feels like Jurassic Park out here. Not a morning person, for the platypuses, I'll do anything. Monotremes are something that have fascinated me for a long time, from the evolutionary perspective, but also just how odd they look. We've made it down to Lake Elizabeth, and this is going to be our best chance of seeing a wild platypus. Found in wetlands across the east and southeast coast of Australia and throughout Tasmania, the platypus is one of two members of the monotreme order. And they're smaller than you might think, only measuring about 50 centimeters long. Unlike placental mammals and marsupials, which both give birth to live young, monotremes are mammals that lay eggs. But laying eggs is by far one of the least interesting things about the platypus. These cuties bring it in every category of being really weird, to the point where, frankly, it's just hard to keep track of. I think I see one straight ahead of me. It's maybe 40 meters off, so I can't see much, but there's something swimming out there. Oh, is that a platypus? We're gonna get closer, see what we can see. The platypus is a perfect example of convergent evolution, when similar traits evolve separately in different species based on similar problems the species had to solve. For example, flying squirrels in North America are not at all related to Australia's sugar gliders, but they both have evolved the same means of transport. But instead of evolving one or two traits similar to other species, the platypus is seemingly made up entirely of parts from other animals. The platypus has a bill like a duck, a tail like a beaver, webbed feet like an otter, electroreceptors like a shark. They lay eggs like a turtle. They have their limbs on their sides like reptiles. They don't have stomachs and lack teeth like echidnas. And they have venom like a viper. The platypus looks like what happens when evolution hits the shuffle button. But this couldn't be further from the truth. While their variety of parts makes them look like a freshwater chimera, all of their disparate features come together perfectly to create the ultimate mashup, resulting in one highly effective weirdo. When British explorers first brought a specimen of a platypus back from Australia to England, it was deemed too ridiculous to be real. No one could believe that this creature wasn't just a Frankenstein of a bunch of different animals stitched together. So it took several more expeditions and more specimens to prove that this thing was indeed a mammal that laid eggs with a duck-like bill. Each one of their strange features serves a valuable purpose. First up, their bill. The reason platypuses have evolved to have a duck-like bill is because of the environment that they were able to conquer: rivers, lakes, and wetlands. Freshwater is murky by nature, and if you're going to hunt in it, you need to rely on something other than your eyes. And so, the platypus has evolved a superpower: electroreception. Commonly found in sharks, chimeras, and a few other cartilaginous fish species, platypus have bills lined with tiny dots called electroreceptors. Platypuses don't have very good eyesight, but the way that they see the world is through electric pulses. Whenever you move a muscle, the contraction generates an electric field. The platypus uses the electroreceptors in the skin of their bills to calculate the voltage difference around them, allowing them to target the electric fields of moving prey with pinpoint accuracy. The platypus dives, heading for the bottom, shaking its head from side to side, seeking out any moving prey. If he detects anything, he can use his sixth sense to zoom in and focus on the prey. In this case, it's a crayfish. It holds still, and he misses it on his first pass. But it's not long before the platypus picks up its presents and heads straight for it. But their sixth sense isn't the only trick up their sleeves. Their bills are also very sensitive. They can detect even the slightest of touches. The platypus's bill is the perfect sensory organ for hunting prey in the dark and murky freshwater depths. They're so effective that they hunt with their eyes and nose closed. Spending about 40% of the night actively looking for food, they need to be well equipped. While bills are great for housing large numbers of electroreceptors, they are also perfect for their feeding strategy. Their bills allow them to bite into the muck and push out any excess mud and water before swallowing. One consequence of the development of electroreceptors is that adult platypuses have no teeth whatsoever. In order to crunch up their meals, they have to scoop up small rocks and press them against the tops of their bills. Platypuses also lack stomachs. Similar to echidnas, their food is digested by going straight from the esophagus to the intestine. Their lack of stomach is so ancient that the part of the mammalian DNA in charge of making a stomach and the digestive compounds in it are entirely gone. Borrowing yet another strategy, but this time from crocodiles, on top of the platypus's bill are two nostrils. This positioning allows them to stick a little bit of their snout and just the tops of their torsos out of the water to breathe without giving away their position to predators. When they dive, they close their nostrils. Platypuses only dive for about 30 seconds at a time, so it's not very long to wait before they have to resurface again. Generally, their recovery time is between 10 and 20 seconds before they can dive back down again. The second most iconic thing about the platypus is their wide tail, an adaptation that they share with a species on the other side of the world, the beaver. They don't come up on land too often, but when they do, it's absolutely adorable. These small, stumpy limbs offer them little support on land, though they get the job done when need be. But beyond strange webbing, male platypuses have an extra weird adaptation on their hind limbs. They have sharp spurs, sharp, venomous spurs. Male platypuses use their venom primarily during the mating season in combat with other male platypuses. Interestingly, the venom, while it does share chemical properties and effects with reptile venom, is not meant to kill or even permanently damage tissue. Platypus venom is meant to subdue competing males while they mate with prospective females. While it may seem strange for a mammal to have venom, they're not the only ones that do. Some shrews have it too. Platypuses are quite solitary animals and prefer to stay in their own company. They claim territories of about 2 kilometers and like to keep that to themselves. They only really socialize for the sake of mating and raising their young. Beyond that, they like to be solo. Once the battle for mating rights is won, females will dig out their burrow in preparation for their young. After 4 weeks of gestation, 2 to 3 eggs are laid and will hatch after about 10 days. Since the mom has no teats, the young, called puckles, will lap up milk from her mammary glands for about 4 months before they're old enough to eat solid meals. In their ecosystem, platypuses are quite hardy animals and can live lives of up to about 11 years in the wild and 17 in captivity. Unfortunately, they're extremely sensitive to the health of their environment. So if there's a lot of pollution in their lakes and river systems, then they get all of that. So that's been decreasing their survivability for quite some time. But at least now there's a lot more conservation efforts to bring them back. It's been something really so special to be out here on Lake Elizabeth, looking for platypus in their territory. This lake here is kind of the perfect place for them. The platypus is listed as a near-threatened species, and with their numbers decreasing, it will take a concerted effort from all of us to maintain the wetlands they call home. Because the world needs more weirdos, and weirdos with painful, venomous spurs aren't the weirdos you want to piss off by destroying their homes.
Understandings are first gained by seeing things at first hand, watching, experiencing.
Metamorphosis.
Metamorphosis, when one thing becomes another.
Metamorphosis.
When we talk about growth, we usually think of growing up.
Metamorphosis.
But the long road of growth is not just up. If it were, it would mean that this little baby would someday look like this.
This process is a truly mind-boggling phenomenon shared by over 65% of all animal species on Earth, the majority of which are insects.
Insects develop from young to adult in 3 different ways. They all start from eggs, of course. Silverfish illustrate the first method. The young are much like the adult except in size. There is no metamorphosis.
So many insects undergo metamorphosis that it would be easier to count those that don't than those that do. Two common insects you may be unlucky enough to see regularly that don't metamorphosize are silverfish and bristletails.
There are two broad categories of metamorphosis, complete and incomplete.
Incomplete metamorphosis, which means no basic change in structure from nymph to adult.
Incomplete metamorphosis is when an insect changes in several stages called instars or nymphs, depending on the species.
These changes are often very gradual, and some species can have up to 15 nymphal stages.
They start as eggs, then they hatch, and at the end of each stage they molt. During molting, the insect separates from their cuticle, their equivalent to skin. They begin to secrete materials that will form their new cuticle, while their old one eventually disintegrates and they break out of it. They're soft at first, but their new cuticle hardens up within a few hours.
During this process, they gain new features.
Cockroaches and crickets, for example, gain wings through molting, and their sexual organs only become functional after their final molt.
The young, called a nymph, has no wings. It gets wings in its final molt.
Because of this gradual development, adult insects that undergo incomplete metamorphosis tend to look like their babies, but with extra features, like a Pokemon's final form, except for maybe Magikarp.
Complete metamorphosis is where things start to get really interesting.
Complete metamorphosis shows 4 distinct changes from egg to adult. The cycle starts when, for example, an adult Mexican bean beetle lays a cluster of eggs.
Species that undergo complete metamorphosis go through 4 distinct phases: egg, larva, pupa, and adult.
Each one of these life stages serves a specific purpose. The goal of a larva is to eat as much as possible so that it can grow and develop, while the goal of an adult is to reproduce. In fact, in some species, the adults don't even eat. They spend their entire adult lives trying to reproduce, fueled by the energy stored by their larval stage.
Larvae hatch from the eggs. The larval stage is mainly a feeding stage.
Goliath beetles can live for up to 2 years in the larval stage and get particularly swole in preparation to pupate.
Now this one is 33 grams exactly now.
The adults generally lay their eggs near a food source so that when they hatch, the larvae can quickly begin to stuff themselves with as much food as they can eat.
As they grow, they molt, and once they've developed enough, they pupate.
When all of the black widow's eggs have been eaten, the maggots pupate.
During this stage, they develop into their final form, adults. Some insects, like moths, form cocoons out of silk or poop to protect themselves as they go through this radical change. Butterflies, on the other hand, don't form protective cocoons, and instead their exterior forms a hard chrysalid. And like butterflies, they can be breathtaking. Some even look like gold.
The chrysalis is a resting stage, during which the animal changes into a beautiful butterfly.
During this stage, the larvae release enzymes that dissolve their own tissue.
Once broken down, the adult structures begin to form out of tiny clusters of cells called imaginal discs. These imaginal discs are cells that are present when the larvae are born. They are attached to their epidermis by a thin stalk and remain dormant throughout their larval stage. Though once awoken during the pupal stage, they go to work.
What they're able to do is almost too fantastical to be true.
Once they're activated, the cells begin to divide very quickly to make more cells, eventually building entire structures like wings in just a few days.
Even more fantastical is the fact that these elements are developed independently of one another and then attached later.
So a wing may be grown in one area and then moved into place, somewhat like assembling a car. You don't have to build each part where it's going to end up. So a leg could be formed near the head and then moved down to its thorax.
Even more fantastical is the fact that some butterflies can remember things from when they were caterpillars.
A caterpillar is a growing up stage in the life of a moth or butterfly.
A group of scientists did an experiment where they would emit a particular smell and then administer a small shock to a caterpillar. The caterpillar would learn to avoid the smell in the future. But the surprising thing is that after the caterpillars went through their metamorphosis, in which their bodies are completely dissolved and reformed, when presented with the same smell, the adult moths would freak out. This suggests that parts of their nervous system have continuity through their radical body change.
By the way, do you know how to tell a butterfly from a moth? Well, the best way is to look closely at the animal's antennae, or feelers.
Roughly 98% of all insects undergo metamorphosis, but it wasn't always this way.
For millions of years, ametabolic animals, or animals that don't metamorphosize, reigned supreme. These early insects hatched as miniature versions of the adults, but that all started to change around 300 million years ago when a new player emerged.
These new insects hatched with bodies that were radically different than their adult forms.
Not only did they look different, but they behaved differently too. They ate different food and occupied different niches. Soon, they started to change their shape to best exploit the resources. For example, some newborns began to look more like worms in order to dig better and find meals underground, while the adults became larger and evolved tools for defense against predators, better vision for flying, color vision to find the tastiest food, and so on.
Since insect generations are so short, new adaptations can evolve very quickly.
Eggs began to hatch earlier and earlier. These pre-nymphs got better and better at fending for themselves and didn't need to stay in the egg as long. These became known as larvae. Though despite how adept these new larvae were at finding food and surviving outside the egg, they still lacked the sexual organs they needed to reproduce. Instead of a slow, gradual transformation, gaining sexual organs as they matured, these insects underwent brief periods of accelerated change, what we now know as pupation. With their various life stages able to dominate different niches, ametabolic insects, who could only specialize in one area and had to compete with their own young for survival, were pushed out of the market.
Insects aren't alone. Amphibians and some fish also undergo metamorphosis.
Frogs, salamanders, and all other amphibians can live on land, but they lay their eggs in the water.
The adult toad spends most of his life on land, but when spring comes, he returns to the pond for the mating season.
When the eggs hatch, the babies emerge with external gills and some fish-like features like fins and a lateral line, an organ that detects vibrations in the water and changes in water pressure. Frogs and toads begin as tadpoles, and as they grow, their legs appear under their gill sacs and their mouths become larger. They start to transition from vegetarian to carnivore, and their intestines lose 75% of their length as a result. They lose their lateral line and instead develop binocular vision, which gives them depth perception. Their tails stay around a bit longer than the rest, but ultimately are lost. Depending on the species, this transition from legless vegetarian swimmers to hopping carnivorous amphibians can take between 2 and 8 months to complete. Some salamanders, like the axolotl, don't undergo a full metamorphosis and stay in their aquatic form instead, retaining their external gills throughout their lives.
Amphibian metamorphosis is controlled by a single hormone called thyroxine, and we still really don't know how it works.
This single hormone tells tail muscles to die, tells limbs to grow, tells intestines to shrink, and makes lateral lines completely disappear.
All that from a single hormone.
I'd like to know more about different kinds of hormones.
Some species of fish also undergo metamorphosis controlled by thyroxine, though not nearly as many fish metamorphosize as insects, as their environment doesn't change all that much.
That said, the fish that do change their strategies as they mature.
Flatfish are born symmetrical and swim around like regular fish. But as they age, their eyes slowly start migrating to one side of their head so that they can eventually stop swimming and spend the rest of their lives on the ocean floor. Eels have 4 stages of metamorphosis, and their larvae are hands down the most mesmerizing larvae in the animal kingdom. In some species, they can stay at this stage for over 2 years, looking for nutrients as they grow and develop.
Salmon undergo metamorphosis because they are anadromous.
They battle their way upstream against swift currents, seeking quiet waters where they may spawn.
Their lives begin in freshwater. Then they go out to sea, and finally they return to freshwater to spawn and die. They start out as alevins. During this stage, they survive off a yolk sac that is attached to them out of the egg. When they finish the yolk, they swim to the surface, fill their swim bladders with oxygen, and begin to look for food. In this stage, they're called fries. As the fries migrate to the ocean, they get larger, grow scales, and turn silver.
They mature in the ocean before returning to the stream from whence they came.
They stop eating and begin to make the struggle upstream. Once they've reached their destination, the males develop a hooked nose to fight each other for mating rights.
After they spawn, they die. Metamorphosis is how most things on this planet get by, yet despite this, it's far too fantastical to describe it as common.
The astonishing change that takes place in this phase of the life cycle is known as metamorphosis.
Every day is a horror movie if you're prey. While most animals deal with predators by running or hiding, a small group has evolved another solution, being just fabulous.
Listen up, honey. Are you ready to have the time of your life? Well, then take my hand and come with me.
Protecting yourself from predators is one of the most important daily tasks for wild animals. Most animals do this by being very good at hiding, by being amazing fighters, living in massive groups, or by being insanely fast. But there's a group of animals that's evolved to be simply weird as hell. Startle coloration is the technique of being outrageously shaped and colored in the hope that predators will find their prey too weird or too scary to eat. In many cases, like in the red-eyed tree frog, the animal is actually well camouflaged most of the time. Look at him, he's one with the leaf. But at the slightest hint of danger, the frog opens its gigantic crimson eyes, fans its Cheeto fingers, and displays its highlighter yellow and blue sides. This flash of color distracts the predator long enough for the frog to jump off to safer ground. This strategy works for the red-eyed tree frog because lots of poison frogs are outlandishly colored, so the predator is preconditioned to be wary of colorful frogs. Some of the most poisonous frogs in the world are colored as if to say, "Eat me and die." The golden poison dart frog, for example, has enough toxins to kill 10 humans. Those frogs have the poison to back up their drip, but for the red-eyed tree frog, it's just a bluff. When the color is an honest threat, we call it warning coloration. But when it's just a bluff, we call it a startle display. Let's see the holders of the most amazing startle displays in nature, insects.
Are these the eyes of a snake? No, they're just spots of color on a little caterpillar. But perhaps birds are frightened by them.
The snake mimic caterpillar looks just like a regular caterpillar, trying to live its best life, eating leaves and staying out of trouble. But once it feels danger, it shows its underside, with 2 bulging eye spots that make it look like a snake. Even the way it moves makes it look like a venomous snake. Extremely startling. It makes sense that caterpillars try to pass themselves off as the predators most similar to them. Some have even evolved to act like them. Some species of swallowtail caterpillar spend most of their life blending in with the leaves that they eat. But when threatened, appendages on its head stick out, making it look like a snake sticking its tongue out. Predators might need a second to double-check that it's just a caterpillar and not a snake or a Pokemon. But that second might give the caterpillar a moment to escape. Similarly, the puss moth caterpillar, named after its furry appearance after metamorphosis, looks pretty normal until it shows its startle display. What is even going on there? It's so ugly, it's kinda cute. Aww. These spooky threats aren't limited to the larval stages of moths and butterflies. Some of them wait until they're full-grown adults to show their startling true colors. The eyed hawk moth is pretty much the color of bark. You would never notice it. But predators do, and when they lay their eyes on it, the moth stares back with its eye spots. The wings expand, showing 2 terrifying eyes. they're realistic enough to make predators wonder if they're really looking at a moth or something much more sinister. On the other side of the spookiness spectrum is the peacock butterfly. With its wings closed, it looks like a dead leaf, or at least a not very appetizing butterfly. But once it opens its wings, what a beaut! Now, call me crazy, but doesn't this shape with the eye spots at the bottom and the pointy top resemble a cat's eyes and ears? Looking like your predator's predator would be a good way to stay safe. Moving over to stick insects, these dudes by definition do everything in their power to look like a piece of the plant they live in. So what do they do when they find themselves face to face with a killer?
Oh my god, I'm in the shower and Harlow was barking like crazy and I'm like, what the fuck is she barking at? What the f? It's literally bigger than Harlow, like what? Oh my god. Harlow, leave it. Look at that compared to my hand. Oh my god, what? Whoa. Good find, Harlow, good find.
Black beauty stick insects, yes, that's their real name, are happy to look like a charred piece of wood with colorful faces. But when they want to be scary, they unfurl their wings, showing 2 sails of crimson and... oh, that's it? Okay, they might not be scary to us, but they're startling enough to fool predators. The giant prickly stick insect is a little more terrifying, but equally harmless as the black beauty. This stick insect is one of the largest insects in the world, at around 20 centimeters long. Its mouth fingers help him grab and demolish plant matter, despite itself looking like a pile of rotten leaves. When it's cranky, the insect raises its arms and moves side to side, making itself look bigger and like it's about to attack. The armband and scary face remind predators of mantises, lethal predators with powerful bites. Mantises can take on powerful opponents with a combination of their bites and sharp arm daggers, but in the wild, every scrap can lead to lethal injuries, so mantids often prefer to be scary first. The devil's flower mantis, with its magnificent scientific name, Idolomantis diabolica, inspired terror in the first Europeans who saw it and gave it that name. Its daily life consists of mimicking a flower so that insects will approach it and search for sweet, sweet nectar. But when threatened, it contorts its head and body into this. Other mantids with amazing startle coloration are the amazing spiny flower mantis, the giant dead leaf mantis, and the Malaysian dead leaf mantis. Yikes, yeah, I won't be touching that. Being a straight-up weirdo isn't just for insects. Even reptiles have figured out strange ways to threaten their foes and sneak out of a fight. The frilled-necked lizard's amazing hood is one of the most iconic threat displays among cold-blooded chillers. You might associate it with the dinosaur that ate Newman in Jurassic Park. But in real life, these reptiles are just serving looks, not people, for dinner. Their frill is exclusively to scare off predators and woo potential partners, not to intimidate their prey. The desert horned lizard goes for gross and simply squirts blood out of their eyes. I don't know about you, but I would not touch anything that's crying tears of blood. Hognose snakes double down on the disgusting act and make predators go, what the heck? By acting like it's dying a painful death. Predators might think it's sick and not worth the risk. The bottom of the ocean is also full of these freaky show-offs. Some of them can even change colors in an instant. Cuttlefish and octopuses have crystals under their skin that can be maneuvered to reflect different colors. This ability can be used for camouflage and as a threat. Most of them are completely harmless to humans, but there are enough dangerous colorful species that you and any predator should be careful when seeing one of their threat displays. The little pufferfish has a cute little smile. Aww. But when it feels threatened, it makes itself seen. Its size and spikes warn predators that it's actually a very poisonous fish. This isn't a bluff. It's a matter of life and death. There are so many ways to scare off your predators. If you ever see an animal doing their threat display, please leave it alone. All it wants is to go home and chill away from scary humans and predators.
Look at that compared to my... Ooh, I touched it. Look at that compared to my hand. Oh my god, what?
It's a squirrel. It's a bird. It's a kite? No! It's the vegetarian night stalker of Southeast Asia. Today, we're in the primate uncanny valley. We have so much in common with these wide-eyed weirdos, but we're also so different. They glide, they have comb teeth, and they're 5 times lighter than your head.
What mysteries do they hold? And what can we learn from them?
This is the strangest almost primate in the world, the colugo. Colugos are sort of a mutant love child of a tarsier and flying squirrel. Their lifestyle is pretty similar to those of other gliding mammals, who mostly eat fruits and nuts and have evolved to jump from tree to tree. For small animals like these, the air is safer than the ground, which is swarming with carnivores. Flying squirrels are possibly the most well-known gliding mammals, but this is a successful strategy that has evolved independently several times over many different orders. In marsupials, gliding has evolved, among others, in the Petaurus genus, which includes sugar gliders and mahogany gliders, and the Petauroides genus, also known as the great gliders. There are also over 50 gliding rodent species around the world, with different species of flying squirrels making up most of them. The most charismatic of these are probably the Siberian flying squirrels. They are just way too cute. They always look like they're mustering up the courage to ask another flying squirrel out on a date. But colugos are different. There is something lemur-like to them, which initially earned them their nickname, the flying lemurs. That moniker is wrong, but not by much. DNA tests have shown that there are closest relatives outside of primates. If you don't really see a resemblance between a colugo and, say, a gorilla, it's because our evolutionary paths diverged during the Cretaceous, when dinosaurs were still hunting little mammals. That's a lot of time to change and adapt to new environments. There are only 2 remaining colugo species. The Philippine colugo lives in the southern Philippines, especially in the islands of Mindanao and Bohol. This is the biggest of the 2 species, at just about 1.5 kilograms. It has a mottled coat and a wide face. They're kinda like the pit bulls of the colugos. And then there's the Sunda colugos, which live in Southeast Asia, from Thailand to Indonesia. They're a little smaller, have solid brown or ginger coats, and a much more delicate little face. They're basically colugo greyhounds. But let's stop beating around the colugo's bushy tail. You came here to see these puppies fly. Look at them go! Colugos have a sort of built-in kite that extends from their wrists to their ankles. It's the maximum amount of coverage that you could have without growing giant wings like bats. Their squirrel suit is called the patagium, and it's made of leathery skin. On top of that, they have webbed feet that maximize the surface they have to glide. To travel between trees, they climb as high as possible and then jump. With their patagium fully outstretched, they can glide for up to 200 meters, but jumps of 20 or 30 meters are most common. As you can imagine from their shape, colugos are not great walkers. Climbing and gliding are their 2 main methods of transportation, and falling to the ground can be deadly. Southeast Asia is teeming with predators. While on the tree canopy, Philippine eagles are the greatest threat. But on the ground, several small cat species, as well as foxes, dogs, and dholes can easily catch a colugo. And so, their entire evolutionary history consists of adaptations to help them traverse the forests by climbing and gliding, and doing it at night when there's no birds of prey around. Have you ever walked in a forest at night without a lamp on? It's terrifying. Colugos do that every night while jumping into the void. Their huge eyes come equipped with giant retinas that give them the night vision and depth perception needed for their leaps. Weirdly, despite being nocturnal, they're thought to have some color vision. Primate color vision evolved after we split off from colugos, but it seems the building blocks were there already, and the ability to see ripe fruit from afar evolved in both orders independently. Besides predators and gravity, the colugo's biggest problem is rough landings on trees. But wouldn't you know it, they also have adaptations to protect themselves and their babies from harsh landings. They have an inbuilt gyroscope that helps them control their speed along the X and Y axis. When they're in glide mode, they are almost perfectly horizontal, so they don't descend as quickly. But when they're about to reach their destination, they swivel themselves upwards. This slows them down on the X-axis, but makes them fall more quickly. so they have to do it at just the right time so that they don't fall to the predator-rich floor.
With all the predators around, it's too dangerous to leave the babies alone in the nest, so Mom takes them wherever she goes.
Colugo babies are born underdeveloped, almost as underdeveloped as marsupial babies. From birth, they attach themselves to the mom's belly. The mom uses her tail to build a little pocket for the babies, making a pseudo-pouch or baby carrier.
And so, moms will carry the babies for months while she's out foraging, and will slowly introduce them to solid foods.
Colugos have a really well-developed digestive system, as they need to eat a lot of fiber. When available, the majority of their meals are fruit salads, with the occasional lichen dessert to get extra minerals.
In times of scarcity, they chew on ants, bark, leaves, and other plant matter.
Their comb-like teeth have the dual purpose of stripping away hard materials, like lichens and tough skin of some fruits, and being a pretty efficient brush to groom themselves to get rid of ticks and other parasites.
Partly because of this diet, colugos are known to have a very high parasitic load in their guts. It's so bad that their feces have been reported to move around due to the sheer number of worms in it. But don't worry, we're not going to show you that. Or are we? No, we're not.
Both colugo species are considered least concern due to their large range. But there is actually some concern due to the rapid deforestation of the region. Colugos live in areas that are quickly developing. There are simply fewer trees, and those that are still there are more spread apart. In some areas, roads are being built, which brings the additional danger of being run over by cars.
There is a current initiative to protect colugo populations by building gliding posts, which are basically utility poles in the middle of the forest or alongside roads. Colugos can use them as platforms and shorten the distance between trees.
We're still learning about colugos, and with the conservation projects in place, we're hoping we can see these little guys thrive. Thalassophobia is the intense fear of the sea, and for many, the bobbit worm is the reason for it. These horrifying marine worms have razor-sharp jaws that can snap their prey in half like twigs before dragging them down into their hellish burrows. The bobbit worm is pure nightmare fuel.
Bobbit worms are some of the most amazing, beautiful, and deadly bristleworms in the world. These danger noodles have been around for ages. The oldest bobbit worm dates back to 400 million years ago, and it was found in the Middle Devonian rocks of Ontario.
Described in 2017, Websteroprion armstrongi was a jawsome beast that was about 1 meter long. These worms are ambush hunters, and from a distance, they look harmless. But if viable prey swims within range, the bobbit explodes out of its hole and catches it in the blink of an eye. Then the prey is dragged down into the depths of hell and never heard from again. The origin of their nickname might be an urban myth, but their mandibles' cutting power is true. They're known to cut small fish in half and stun larger prey just long enough to pull them into their mucus-lined burrows. Bobbit worms are mostly nocturnal predators, so they need to be able to sense prey in the dead of night without using their eyes. To do that, they have 5 antennae coated with sensory organs that can detect chemicals and vibrations in the water.
Once prey is detected, it's time to go on a chopping spree.
When striking, a bobbit worm fires out of its hole at around 6 meters a second. Their mouth parts are hidden, but on their way up to their prey, they turn outwards like a finger in a glove. The mandible provides the cutting power, and the secondary serrated mouth parts, called maxillae, grasp the prey and bring it into the mouth. There are some claims that the mandible can inject a paralyzing toxin, but this hasn't been confirmed and research is ongoing.
But their head is not the only interesting thing about bobbits. Their bodies can be beautifully iridescent, and they're super long.
Bobbits are just about 2.5 centimeters wide, but they can be up to 3 meters long. Their bodies are segmented, and each segment has bristles. As they grow, they add segments to their body. The current record holder for most segments was a Japanese bobbit with an amazing 673.
Having all those segments can be helpful for 2 reasons. 1, they can be ejected in case they get caught by a predator, and 2, detached segments might still work as sexual organs.
Bobbit worms have been observed breaking themselves into 2 or more parts when handled. Amazingly, sometimes more than one part can survive and regrow the missing parts. So, by splitting themselves, you get 2 short, genetically identical bobbit worms instead of a single long individual.
The sexual aspect of their segment detachment hasn't been confirmed. Nobody knows quite how bobbit worms mate, but their closest relatives are all broadcast spawners. That means that the females eject unfertilized eggs and the males fertilize them.
On some bristleworm species, possibly including the bobbit worm, as the animal becomes sexually mature, it grows gonads in its lower segments. When it's time to spawn, the lower segments separate and float towards the surface to meet other lower segments.
It's like a blind date for severed genitals.
If you find this cornucopia of adaptations a bit too much, you don't have to worry about encountering these long boys. Most bobbits live on the ocean floor at depths of between 10 and 40 meters, so you're unlikely to meet one of them at the beach.
But if you have a saltwater aquarium, you might accidentally bring a bobbit worm into your house.
Bobbit worms sometimes hitch rides in ocean rocks or water used to fill saltwater aquaria. When they're young, they can survive eating coral or other organic matter.
But when they get big, they start going for the fish. Something like this happened at the New Quay Blue Reef Aquarium in England.
The aquarium staff started finding mutilated, dead fish in the morning. So they set traps overnight, but they would come back to find that these traps were destroyed.
See those legs? It's like a horror movie. I don't know how to see this guy without pissing him off.
This led to a complete draining of the aquarium.
After doing that, they found a 1.2 meter long bobbit worm, which they named Barry.
Oh my god, dude, I'm freaking out. That's some Tremor shit. Anybody see that movie?
By then, he had killed several fish, but was the most popular animal in the aquarium. So he was moved to his own enclosure and lived peacefully ever after.
And this is our famous bobbit worm underwater sand waterfall amazing tank. The bobbit worm is over here. This is a very deep sand bed, and he never seems to go below 2 inches of the sand, but we gave it to him anyway. I think he likes the waterfall. The view is too nice up top.
At dawn and dusk, these miniature dragons chase their insect prey across the sky in a killer game of tag. But all is eerily still and quiet when the sun is out and these birds go undercover as twigs. Today, we are talking about nightjars, masters of camouflage by day, tiny terrors by night. Nightjars are darkness-loving birds that can be found across the world. In some regions, they're known as nighthawks, or, quite self-explanatorily, bug eaters. There are almost 100 different nightjar species spread out between 3 subfamilies and 20 genera. They can be found on every continent except for Antarctica. They also shy away from dry mountain areas and a few select island groups. Some well-known birds in this order include common nighthawks, whippoorwills, parroquets, and Eurasian nightjars. These bug-eyed bug eaters were grouped together with fellow potus and frogmouths until 2021, when the decision was made to split them into different orders. One characteristic that was shared among all of these birds was their huge mouths. I'm talking ginormous. It is these big mouths that earned the nightjars the nickname goatsuckers. Folktales from more than 2,000 years ago recount stories of this bird swooping across the evening sky to presumably attack goat udders. The idea was so pervasive that the scientific name for the family is Caprimulgiformes, which literally translates to goat milkers. In reality, though, they were probably flying around eating insects that are found near farm animals like goats. Let's chalk this up to bad eye care and poor lighting during the Dark Ages. Even with 20/20 vision, you would need a laser-sharp focus and maybe infrared goggles to spot these statues in the wild. Nightjars use cryptic coloration as a defense tactic to blend into their surroundings. Their feathers are a combination of black, white, and every shade of brown you can imagine. For the species that roost in trees, they even position themselves horizontally to look like a piece of branch. There is lots of physical variation in the goat milker family, with a few among them sure to steal your heart. But first, let's start with the great-eared nightjar. This bird is found in subtropical forests across Southeast Asia. It is the largest nightjar, with individuals getting up to 40 centimeters long. It is also the second heaviest nightjar, weighing up to 150 grams. I don't know about you, but with the two little beige tufts atop this bird's head, it reminds me a lot of Toothless from How to Train Your Dragon. Though the dragon roar could use a little bit of work. Tied for second place for the Do These Birds Actually Exist award are the lyre-tailed nightjar and the pennant-winged nightjar. Both these birds have abnormally large feathers that give them a spectacular mythical edge. Lyre-tailed nightjars of the western Andes have outer tail feathers that are twice as long as their body. Pennant-winged nightjars, on the other hand, are found in Africa and have their second primary wing feather that trails behind them majestically in flight. A great contender for third place would be the standard wing nightjar, whose tale of two tails would leave anybody speechless. It's likely that all these extravagant feathers play an important role during mating flight displays. If the male is successful in impressing the female, they will mate, and then she will lay 1 to 3 eggs. A perfect ending to A Tale of Two Tales. Most nightjars prefer field and open habitats for nesting, especially woodland edges. Some are ground nesters and will scrape out little bowl-like shapes that will hold their eggs, which are often patterned to blend in with their environment. Others take it a step further and nest in small ledges on a tree branch. Across most nightjar species, the male and female share the incubating responsibilities for about 2 to 3 weeks, though typically it's the female that spends most of the time on the nest. Here, mom and dad will try to minimize movement to prevent detection from predators like pine martens and red foxes. But when threatened, birds like nightjars and killdeer use a cunning strategy where they fake an injury to guide their predators away from their nests. Sneaky, sneaky! Once the chicks hatch, the parents get to work feeding the nestlings. In the case of the common porwheel, while the male is feeding the first clutch, the female will sometimes lay a second clutch 100 meters from the first nest site. This bird definitely takes the cake for most efficient parenting. Newly hatched chicks are dependent on both mom and dad for food. Nightjars are insectivores, and their preferred meals usually consist of swarming insects, like mosquitoes and flies. Because these birds have unusually large mouths, they often chomp on some of the bigger flying insects, like beetles, moths, and winged ants. Similar to owls, chick and adult nightjars eat all the nutritious parts of the insect, but regurgitate all the indigestible materials as pellets. Nestlings are independent and ready to fend for themselves 2 weeks after hatching. Many nightjars, like the Indian nightjar, are residents, which means that they spend all their time within the same region. Other nightjars, like the common nighthawk, are migratory. Western Canadian populations of nighthawks have been radio tagged and are found to travel between their breeding grounds in Alberta to their wintering grounds in the Amazon. Another North American nightjar species does something altogether different. The common poorwill is unlike all other birds in that it enters a state of torpor. Torpor is a physiological state that only select birds like hummingbirds, doves, and poorwills can enter to conserve energy by lowering body temperature, breathing, and heart rate for weeks and sometimes months on end. Some indigenous communities, like the Hopi tribe, have known about this behavior for a while. They call poorwills holchigo, or the sleeping one. This likely refers to the behavior when these birds are found among piles of rock in a sleep-like state of torpor. While these birds don't cause much of a ruckus when they are in torpor, the opposite is true during their active periods in spring, summer, and fall, especially during feeding times. Many nightjars are also named for the sounds they make. For example, the whippoorwill. Or the chuckwill's widow. It is no wonder why some nightjar calls have been nicknamed the witch's cackle and have been suspected of witchery themselves. Take a listen to the European nightjar for proof. I'm not so sure I'd be able to fall asleep peacefully after hearing those ghastly sounds in a dark forest. What I do know, though, is I would prefer hearing these bird calls over a silent forest devoid of nightjar activity.